All right, when I couple bottle of water or something.
That would be wonderful if you got one.
All right, this is great.
If not, I'll be
So
very
who
okay
is gonna
too.
be the one to present? You're gonna get a cold.
Yeah, water, whatever you got.
Cold. Would you be so kind? Of course, if it's cold, gotta be in the fridge, right?
Not always. It could be warm. Just recently placed in the fridge.
Yeah, well, it's like, my gosh. Oh, wow. I'm so happy. This is a very special day for us. For the very first time, we are receiving a very special guest. Is flew all the way from California. Is spending a whole week here with us. Um, he was with us on Monday and in other spirit centers in Orlando, and it's my great pleasure to introduce Daniel Assisi for you. He is a spiritist, a speaker, and also he's a writer. He has been all over the world in 4 different continents, over 60 cities, speaking about the spirituality, spiritism, our lives, uh, trying to bring a new perspective into, into our lives. Recently, very recently, about less than a year ago, he has written this book, and people are raving about it. He has received several awards, and it's my pleasure to mention and embarrass him at the same time. He is the winner of the 15th Annual National Indie Book Excellent Awards, silver medal at the 2021 Illumination Book Awards, finalist at the 2021 Book Life Nonfictional Prize by Publishers Weekly. He has a doctorate degree in education and also a master in public administration. So we are here with a very special friend. You see how he has the ability to touch our hearts and minds at the same time with a lot of wit. So our meeting is going to be around what? 45 minutes. As in every single spiritist meeting, we start with a prayer. Uh, we like to also to help us to disconnect from our life outside, from the world outside. We like to read a spiritual message, help us to just to put us together mentally, emotionally for the meeting. This is a spiritual meeting. At the same time, we are listening to our talk. We are also enjoying the spiritual environment with good vibrations. So we are going to see what we are inspired to read tonight. Just less than a minute of a message just to put us together. Okay, be yourself regardless of the circumstances. Don't try to come across as a superior or inferior to what you really are. Good advice, isn't it? If you want a better position, work hard to get it. Whenever you find imperfections, strive to improve yourself. People lie either when they purport to have skills they do not actually have, or when they hide or deny the ones they do have. Being genuine is a way to acquire dignity. The ascent is slow for everyone. Those succeeding today began their struggle in their fight earlier on. So this is a good advice, just to be genuine, be ourselves, and also thriving in our way to become better individuals, um, as much as we can. So how about if I invite you to just to transform mentally this place, and let's visualize maybe a beautiful garden. I'm gonna ask to dim the lights, even this one here, just to help us to concentrate a little better. And if we could have some music to just help us to concentrate better, to relax. So how about we transform through the power of our minds, of our thoughts? Let's transform this place in a beautiful garden with the flowers and vegetations and of our own like, just bringing harmony and peace. As we visualize this place being transformed through the power of our minds, we do focus in the sky and we see beautiful stars that remind us the Creator look at us all, and it's to Him that we have our hearts through a very simple prayer. It's a Christian prayer, very powerful, simple and beautiful. And that this is how we relate to the Creator, to God. In our hearts saying, Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread. Forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. Lead us not into temptation. Deliver us from evil. So it's in name of God, in name of our spirit benefactors, that we have the immense pleasure to start our meeting. So with no further ado, we would like to invite our friend Danielle Assisi to talk to us.
Thank you.
It's all yours. I left a copy of your book here.
Oh, thank you. That is so kind
As
of you.
you don't know it.
Good evening, everyone. How are you? Good. Thanks for being here today. Let me see if I can get that my presentation over there so that you can actually see what I'm trying to talk about. Okay. Okay. Oh, it probably gets better if we do this. Yes. Okay. So our topic for today is our road to Damascus. And I should start by saying that many of us have probably been introduced to or read or known the story of Paul the apostle going from Jerusalem to Damascus at one point in time. And in that story, within the Christian tradition in general, is generally referred to as a story of conversion, right? Paul is a Jew and he's going to Damascus to persecute some folks. Along the way, he sees Jesus and he converts to the Christian faith. That's not exactly the perspective that I take. I want to be clear and frank with you. For me, this is a story about choice and personal transformation regardless of religion. This is about somebody who was sure of what his life was about, and then something happened that led him to fundamentally reevaluate who he was and what he did. And I think it's a pretty contemporary story in many different ways. I think it has become more contemporary with the pandemic and everything else that's happening around. And I think it's really a great framework that we can use, symbolically speaking, to kind of understand what kind of change may happen in our lives as we begin to try to ponder what is our meaning of life, what is the purpose in life. So I really like the story quite a bit for that purpose, because I think that it does speak a lot to our times, to the change that everybody goes to, and fundamentally because it serves as a blueprint of sorts, which means at the end of the day, which is really important, the most important piece is that when we're in the thick of it, sometimes we feel so downtrodden, we feel so desperate and so sad. But if we know what's ahead, we know what the process is, it may bring some comfort to our hearts to know that, things are not spinning out of control. It's just part of change. So that's what I hope you would walk out here with. This idea that we all go through change, and change is hard. And we're going to talk a little bit about that. But at the end of it, it's always worth it. Make sense? All right. And hopefully I won't talk too much and we have a chance to interact as well. But I got to be very honest with you that this story became a book. It wasn't before, but then it did. And it was a cool thing for me because I used to do this topic sometimes, and every once in a while somebody say, have you written this down? Is there like an article or something? And after the fourth or fifth person told me that in different places, I said, okay, I got the hint. I am going to write an article. It will be 3 or 4 pages, right? It'll be something interesting that I can share with friends. And so it was December of 2019. I was in London, actually, over there with some of our spiritualist friends. I decided that I was just going to start writing this article. Little did I know that, 5 pages in, I was an introduction, 10 pages in, I was realizing it wasn't article anymore. So it ended up starting as an article for other people, and it ended up being a book for me, if that makes sense. Because, just like Poe's letters in many different ways. But the interesting thing is, during that time, I had also quit my job of 12 years before because I wasn't satisfied. And I just jumped into the unknown saying, I can't figure out what my life's going to be while I'm still doing this whole thing. And so I was taking like a sabbatical of sorts. And then COVID happened and everything stopped. So my timing was impeccable, right? But at the end of it, this kind of came out. And so I say that because there's no way, since I like this topic so much, that in 30 or 40 minutes, I'm going to be able to share with you all the beauty of what I think to be one of the greatest transformations of all time, which is from Saul to Paul, and what it can mean to us. If you are interested, don't feel the pressure. There's more in the book. But I do think that we got to cover at least like the main pieces, right? And my idea here, and I do this in the book too, is to get 7 different pieces. And I just chose the number 7 because it's a nice number, right? Let's just be honest. There's no rhyme or reason. That could be 10, 11, 12. There's so much symbolism in this story, right? And it turns out that I also wanted to make sure that it wasn't religious-y. I think that we need less religious-y things in the world. It's not about what label you place on yourself, because there wasn't even a Christianity at the time. There wasn't even a religion called Christianity at the time that this happened. This is about a guy going through a life crisis, changing his job, and deciding what he wants to do. And in the process of doing that, changing the world, right? And so I want to talk to you a little bit about that. I was really happy that Kirkus recognized that and said that, no, hey, this is not about religion, but it's interesting in there. But anyways, I say that because we also have to talk a little bit about Paul, right? We have to level set, because we all know Paul today in the Judaico-Christian tradition as this like incredible human being. We even name him sometimes like Saint Paul, right? Like he's got the halo. He's just like special and mystical. He was the apostle to the Gentiles, that is to everybody who was non-Jew. And to be honest, Christianity as we know today is really possible because of Paul. It is his letters, his writings that have really frame Christianity for us. The New Testament, for instance, which is the newer part of the Bible, the Christian Bible, it's made out of 27 books, right? 4 of those are the Gospels, right? Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, right? One is the Acts of the Apostles. The other one is the Apocalypse. The other ones are letters from Paul, basically, right? So the bulk of the New Testament, like almost half of it, is what he tells us. So he's clearly very important, and he has walked throughout the known world. As a matter of fact, look at all the different travels he has done, carrying that message and sharing that with people way before there were frequent flyer miles. If you complain about your Wi-Fi or the food on your airplane, you got nothing on Paul. That was all by foot. That's incredible, right? So clearly he was incredibly passionate, because you don't do this if you're forced to do it. You do it because you love it. So this kind of dedication. So it's important to say that. And so he's clearly a special human being in the sense of he has really applied himself. But when we see all these things, sometimes we forget that before he was Paul, he was Saul. And Saul was an interesting character. Saul was the most fervent opponent of early Christianity. Many of us have read a book called Paul and Stephen, which is a fantastic book, psychographed by Chico Xavier, written by Emmanuel, and it is a story of Paul. It's a fantastic book. And we will see that in that book, that Saul is actually the one who has Stephen killed. So he's got a lot of baggage that he's carrying with him in the name of what he believes. And then he fundamentally transforms and becomes somebody else that's different. But to really understand that too, I think it's nice for us to kind of dive a little bit into who was Paul, or Saul, to be honest, right? Because he took on the name Paul after he converted later on. He wanted to do it, turn around. And Saul in the Hebrew tradition means like the greatest, and Paul means the smallest. So he purposefully chose a name that changed the perspective of different things. But not to dwell too much in here, but I want to take you on a journey with Paul, because the idea was, how can we follow him and place ourselves in his footsteps, and then see what we learn from it? What was it like to go on that journey? Because people say, oh, then he converted to Christianity, but it's never that simple. It's never like this and you're a better human being. It doesn't happen, right? So what does it feel like? And so there's 7 stops along the way that we're going to do together. But I want to tell you a little bit about Saul, because we know that Saul was a really interesting human being. Saul was born to a well-to-do family in the city of Tarsus, which was a center of learning at the time. So he grew up in a metropolis. He grew up speaking many different languages, studying quite a bit, and he turned out to be very smart. And he did really well academically. And he also did very well in sports and everything else. So from a young age, he had everything going for him. And he really excelled at spiritual studies, or at that time studying the Jewish law. And that time is also very important to say, there was no distinction between religion and civil law. It was all one thing. So they call it the law, right? So if you're Jewish, there was one law that you had to obey. He was so good at it that at a very early age, he was able to get to the highest level of the law, the council called Sanhedrin, that basically was the Supreme Court of the time for Jewish folk. And in that process, he was really passionate and just really great about the scriptures and everything else. It was clear that his heart was in it. He was really trying to do the right thing. But a couple of interesting things, we are told, happens in his life. And you can read that in that book, Paul and Stephen, that I refer to as one of the most amazing books I've ever read. It's probably in my top 3 for sure. It's a big one, but it's worth reading. We learn a couple of things. We learned that, across his life, he ended up falling in love with a young, beautiful girl called Abigail. And it turns out that Abigail had, for a lot of different things, had a brother who had been sent aside and so forth. They lost touch with her. And Abigail was also very religious, very pious, very beautiful, and very kind. and everything was going well for Paul. He was going to marry Abigail. But he was also making his fame by persecuting these people, these Jewish people who have been paying attention to this prophet, this new guy called Jesus. And a lot of people were moving away from the synagogues to start to listen to these people. And for Paul and everybody else, this was obviously a no now, because these people are being taken away from the law, from what's right. So he starts to go around and debating with different people, dialoguing, and then eventually arresting them. And one of these people that was really doing a fantastic job speaking and was really inspired was this guy called Stephen. And he was drawing a lot of people to this new way of thinking, which was called the way back in the day, before it was called Christianity. And so Saul literally goes to this place, this house on the way, where there was a lot of charitable work, and they did this talking about the teachings of Christ, to challenge Stephen to a debate, right? To really show him, because he was really smart. And Stephen never engaged. He was really kind and something, just kind of walked away. Long story short, eventually he has Stephen arrested, and it's the big day, and Stephen's going to be stoned to death because he's not recanting. And in that day, Paul says, this is going to be a great professional day for me. I am going to also announce to the world that I'm marrying Abigail. This is going to be a fantastic piece. This is my day. And so the stoning starts happening. Abigail comes, and she realizes that the person who's being stoned is her long-lost brother. And so it turns out that Saul has had her brother stoned to death. But before he dies, the brother, he is so happy to see her, and he says, forgive him. He did not know. He's a good man. But something interesting happens. From that moment, Saul decides not to marry Abigail, because his professional career speaks louder. He says, I cannot be associated with the sister of a known Christian. And so out of spite, out of a lot of things, he lets go. He goes through his things and everything else. Long story short, long time later, he goes and changes his mind. He realizes that Abigail was the woman for him, and he goes after her, and he finds her. But when he finds her, she has been converted to the ways of this new prophet, the Christ. And she's about to die too, because she's sick. So he sees her for a little bit, and then she passes away. And then all of a sudden, when he thought he found his happiness again, she's taken away. And he is probably very angry and very frustrated. And he doesn't know what to do with his emotions, I think. And he decides that he's going to persecute. He's going to get and arrest the guy who led her to believe in this nonsense stuff. And this guy is Ananias. And Ananias has gone to where? Damascus. So that is why he's going to Damascus. He has gotten permission from the Supreme Court at the time to go chase and bring back Ananias, dead or alive. And so he goes from Jerusalem to Damascus. And in the process, and this is the road, right? This is sort of like part of the road. So this is what it looks like. It's about 140 miles away. It's not a short thing. It would take a couple of days. We're talking about maybe 5, 6, 7 days, right, for you to go. There were no Motel 6s. People did not leave the light on for you. There were no credit cards, no drive-throughs. So for you to make that trek, you needed a caravan. You needed a convoy of sorts. So he got 3 more people to go with him, servants that he had worked before. They were like camels and horses and all that good stuff. So he is on this road for a couple of days. When you're close to Damascus, right? You can imagine how hot it would have been, right? When you're close to Damascus, all of a sudden he feels the sun and he starts feeling a little dizzy, and he falls off his horse onto the floor. And while he's on the floor, he hears a voice. Saul, Saul, why do you persecute me? And he realizes in that instant that is the voice of Jesus, the so-called Christ. And in that moment, he understands that something special is happening here. He feels it, not just knows it, right? His big brain knows a lot of things, but he feels that apparition. It's actually the promised Messiah of sorts. It's something incredible. And he realizes automatically that all that he has been doing was persecuting that idea. And so what does he do? He could have said, no, no, listen, Christ, I didn't know. I'm so sorry I didn't know who you were. Clearly, you're an important guy. He does none of that. What he does is says, what would you have me do? He decides to change in that moment. And Christ gives him an answer that's not a very fulfilling answer. He says, go to Damascus and wait. It's not an answer, right? It's like, it's a plan to plan. It's not a plan. And so when he comes out of that vision that lasts for a while, guess what has happened? His three friends that work for him, well, colleagues, right, that work for him, see him in the ground and saw him talking, and they think that he is crazy because they did not hear or see the apparition. In different parts of Acts of the Apostle, where you can officially read the story, a couple of verses, it says that one of them might have heard something, but they didn't see it. Christ appeared just to him. And now they think that this very important man, who's their boss, right, a Supreme Court judge of sorts, probably has some like sunstroke or something. And so they're like, ooh, what if this guy dies? I imagine what they're thinking. So they're like, let's get him. Let's go back to Jerusalem. Let's take him back to the big city. Let's make sure that this doesn't happen on our watch. And he's like, no, we're going to Damascus. And they're like, no, you can't. You're possibly not well. So they have this back and forth, and they realize that he's not going to go. So what they end up doing is that two of them go back to let people know what's happening, and one of them agrees to go to Damascus. I know I'm talking a lot, but this is helpful, I hope, later on, right? I'll try to be short. But he gets there, and he was a very famous politician of sorts. So it would have been an honor to host Saul. Whoever he stayed at, because there was no really hotels, right? Whoever he stayed with would be really, oh, wow, you're hosting that person. So he had many friends, and he knocks at their door one by one, and he says, this is what happened to me. Can you take me in? Oh, by the way, did I mention that he was blind? After he saw the light and he fell down, he couldn't see anymore. He's blind. So the other guy like had to literally carry him because he can't walk around. Small detail, right? And guess what happens? None of his former friends take him in, because now he's talking about this thing about he saw the Christ, he's changing his way. Like, they don't want to have anything to do that. So they give him like excuse, and all of a sudden he's in Damascus with the other guy. He doesn't have any money, really, just a little bit. He is blind. He doesn't have where to stay. So what does he do? So they end up finding an inn, and an inn at that time was a spare room in somebody's business or house, right? They find it in a street called Straight, according to the Acts of the Apostle, like one of the main streets. And there, his companion leaves him, right? And Saul realizes the companion now is getting a little bit worried, because Saul is telling people what's happening when he talks to them about Jesus. And his companion is kind of getting worried of being associated with the Jesus story. He also has a job, right, for the Sanhedrin. Tough stuff. And so Saul realizes that and lets him go, say, go back, go to your family. I'm okay. So here he is for a couple of days, maybe 1, 2, we don't know, maybe 3, in this inn where he's blind and he's just waiting for something to happen. Just waiting. Now, unbeknownst to him, remember Ananias, the guy he was persecuting? Well, he too receives a visit from the Christ. And the Christ says, go to this place in the street called Straight, and you will find Saul. There, go there and heal him. And I can only imagine a conversation, right, with Ananias. Clearly, Ananias is a very cool guy to have that vision, right? To Christ appear to him. Amazing. But I can imagine that conversation. Lord, do you mean the guy that's persecuting and killing people? You want me? He's coming after me. You want me to go over there? And he goes. That was a size. That's his faith, right? And so he goes. He basically gives us a passes. Scales falls from Paul's eye. He can see again. And from there on, Ananias helps Saul get plugged into Damascus and understand like the Christian, like, he starts to like read the Gospels and so forth. So it's a fantastic story. And of course, Saul doesn't become Paul all of a sudden. He goes into the desert, meditates for 3 years, and so forth and so forth. But it's a fantastic story. It's a really incredible story in many different ways, and one that actually took place. But why do I say that? Because out of his story, I think that there are definitely 7 different items. And we're going to go through them quickly. But I think they're meaningful. You can always go back and double click on whichever one you want to on your own, because you can read his story, right, in the Acts of the Apostle, and you can meditate and think about this. But the first lesson that I think that we get out of this whole story is that in his journey from Jerusalem to Damascus, he was in a group, but he was alone. What does that mean? That although he had 3 other people in his caravan with him, going the same place, starting from the same place, the other 3 did not see Christ, did not see the call. And they all wanted to go back to Jerusalem. That is to say that these key passages and moments in our lives are individual by nature. You can be with your family, your group of friends, but there are times, important times in your life, where you will be surrounded by people, but you may feel alone because it is your decision in your life. So if sometimes you feel that you are alone and nobody understands you, that's okay. That is expected, because other people cannot make decisions for you on how to live your life. Other people cannot make you evolve, as we say in Spiritism. You need to make your own choices and bear the consequences of those actions. So it does feel alone, even if you're surrounded by people. That's difficult. Very hard. It doesn't mean they don't love us. It doesn't mean they don't care for us. It just means that it is up to us to decide how we are going to take our next steps. The reassuring part of this is, if you feel that you are in that spot right now, it means that maybe you are on the road to change. Don't feel that life is out of control. It could be that you're just being prepared to make an important change in your life. I'm going to speed up here. The second piece of this journey that I want to talk about really briefly is that we have this impression sometimes that spiritual evolution or growth is going to come in a magical way. Right? On one day, we're going to wake up and we're going to be a better person. The skies are going to open. A ray of sun is going to shine from the top. Angels will come singing. Whoa! And all of a sudden, you're enlightened. That's not how we grow. Saul's meeting with the Christ was one in which he literally fell off his horse. Have you ever fallen off a horse? I actually have. It hurts. It hurts. So he fell off his horse, literally and figuratively. Here's one of the most powerful men of the Jewish people falling off and getting hurt in front of a carpenter that had been killed by Roman forces. Right? It's a whole role reversal there. But by that I mean that change sometimes in our lives does not come wrapped in a pretty bow. It comes by exposing us to hardship. Because sometimes destiny, life, whatever you want to call the universe, God, has knocked on your door so many times and you have not listened. And so you're put in a position where you will have to listen. Because if you continue in the path that you are going, it will be worse for you in the long run. That's sort of like why we have pain sensors in our hands. If you put your hand in the fire, you will feel pain. But if you didn't have those nociceptors, you would have melted your hand away. So that's actually a good thing that I got to take my hand out of there. Pain does that to us in our lives. We hate it, but it's an incredible and helpful friend in noticing that something needs to change. And so when you find yourself in tough moments, whether they be pandemic, financial, relationship, whatever it is that's related to, that is the universe calling you to pay attention that something needs to change. We generally vilify those moments, but we actually should be thankful for them. There are markers along the way that we need to think about how to change. And for us spiritists, that makes sense because we understand reincarnation. We understand the love of God a little bit better, I think, than we used to in the past. But I don't want to dwell too much because otherwise I'll be talking here the whole time about just number 2. But the important thing is, if you find yourself in that moment of pain right now, maybe this is a signal that something needs to change. Don't feel that you are out of control. Don't feel the universe is against you. Quite the opposite. You are being directed to a new place. And as we continue to walk on our road there to Damascus, the third item that I want to bring to you is the courageous question. You see, when Saul was faced with Christ, he didn't explain himself, because clearly, if the Christ can show up at a big light and knock him down his horse and can do many different things, it could really have killed him, whatever it is, right? It was clearly like an unknown force, and he realizes it. But he doesn't excuse himself. So he doesn't say, I'm so sorry. I didn't know who you were, sir. Had I known that you were the big guy, I would have been a lot nicer to your people. Maybe I would have joined your team before, right? None of that happened. He understands that change needs to take place. And what does he do? Jesus asks him a question. Saul, why do you persecute me? And what did he say? He answers with another question. Lord, what would you have me do? That is an incredibly courageous question, because it's a question that reviews that he does not know what to do. He realizes that what he has done before has not worked for him. It worked until then, but now he doesn't know what to do. And it takes guts to say, I don't know what to do next. And I realize that you, clearly a powerful entity, and I can feel it, knows better than I do. So help me. I want to change, but I want to be different. And I realize that doesn't work anymore, but I don't know what to do. And how often have we felt like that in our lives? And we think that we should know all the time what we should do. In fact, I think it's like a hidden assumption where we think that the whole world knows what they want to be when they grow up. But they don't. Nobody does. It's a big fallacy. We're all trying to figure it out. But sometimes it takes admitting it to ourselves and asking for help to move forward. Because time is approaching us here quickly, I'm going to go forward. But the fourth piece that's also interesting is when we are met with choice and an incredible thing in our lives, and change really is upon us, and we might also experience temporary blindness. Not physical blindness, as Saul experienced, but we might just not know where to go, what to do, what's up, what's down, how things work, what do we want. And so if you are in this incredible moment of confusion, which I think our planet is in, I think the pandemic also showed that we are all confused in many different ways. Because now we don't know if we want to go back to what we had before or if we want to do something different. I think we're still struggling with that. So I think that still applies to groups. But individually, sometimes we just don't know. We feel like we don't understand anything. And it's not uncommon for us who begin to embrace spirituality and understand that we are not our physical bodies and that we reincarnate and that we might want to spend more time focusing on things in the spirit, to be in shock of our material values. I am learning this thing that material stuff is not important, but my everyday life tells me that for me to be successful, I should have all the material things. Which one is it? How do I manage this? I don't know. So if you are in that confusion, if you are in that blindness, it's a good sign. You are in the middle of change. You are letting go of what was before you and making space for what is to come, because you cannot hold on to the past and grab the future at the same time. We all want to do that. We all want to hold on to the past and grab the future and then let go of the past because that's safe. But to make space for what is new, you got to let go first. And that's super hard. That's scary. But that's what was happening to Saul. As he was blind, he didn't know where he was going. He did not know what was going to happen, but he made the choice. And that's actually the next piece here that we want to talk about, is he made the decision to go ahead. You see, sometimes when we are thrown our proverbial horses and we feel blind and lost, which I think all of us do at points in our lives, sometimes quite frequently, we all have a choice. We can go back to Jerusalem, or we can move forward to Damascus. Symbolically speaking, Jerusalem is everything that we've known and done before. Damascus is the new, is the promise that Christ makes, and go to Damascus and wait. But we don't know what it looks like. But we can choose. So which one is it? Again, the pandemic is asking us this question. Are we going to go back to Jerusalem? Are we going to go back to everything that we had before? Was our life so great that we just want to go back to a pre-pandemic world? I think we can agree that there were some wonderful things, right, that we are enjoying now, that we don't have to use masks all the time and so forth. But that life, that world wasn't great to begin with. But sometimes when we're in pain, that safety looks really great. But the question that we have to ask ourselves is, do we go back to Jerusalem, or do we keep walking to Damascus even if we can't see where we're going? We have to make that decision. And if we find ourselves in a place in our lives where these situations keep repeating itself, I wonder it's because we keep going back to Jerusalem and then making our way back, having that thing and going back to Jerusalem and going back and forth. So that's something that each one of us has to think and ponder and meditate by ourselves. Are we ready to go to Damascus? I think you know which way Saul walked. And it turned out okay. And so as we move forward here, right now, so far, you have listened to a lot of hardship, but there's good news. Another message that we also take from Saul's journey is that we get help. Just like Saul got in that room in the street called Straight in the inn in Damascus, Ananias came to help him. And isn't it supremely ironic that the thing he was persecuting, the thing that he hated the most, the man who he blamed for the conversion of his loved future wife that passed away, the one place that he canalized all his anger was exactly the person who came to heal him. Can you see the poetry in this thing? Isn't that incredible? And isn't it also incredible that Ananias knew where to find him? You see, divinity works in such a way, God, Jesus, our spiritual benefactors, that they send the help even before we know that we truly need it. Because for Ananias to get there, Jesus might have already had to send them, and Jesus already knew where he was going. So if you feel that you are blind and lost and lonely in your own inn, somewhere in a strange, different place, and that you're abandoned and nothing's going on for you, spirituality has already sent, God has already sent your benefactor. So you have to ask yourselves, who is your Ananias? What is your Ananias? What is this helper that you're not expecting that is right in front of you? Maybe you already know him, her it. Maybe it's a situation in life. Maybe it's the spiritist group. Maybe it's the friends you've met here. But you already have in and around you what you need to be successful, to be happy. Because if you didn't, this will be a cruel world created by a cruel God. And that cannot possibly be, because God is all loving. So we always get unexpected help. And that's a fantastic piece. And that's 6. We could do more, but let's rush to 7. 7 is also very important for us to think about, is Damascus itself. You see, when Saul left Jerusalem, he thought he was going to arrive at a Damascus where he would find Ananias, he would bring it back, he would be recognized, it was granted. Like, this was his vision of what Damascus was. But when he got to Damascus, he was blind, he was lost, and Ananias actually saved him. That's a different Damascus. Clearly, they were the same Damascus, but they were a different Damascus. You get my drift? Right? Right? Geographically, it's the same place. But what that symbolized to him and what he found there were completely different. And I wonder if that doesn't have a degree of relationship to us in a way that sometimes we think that our goals in life are these. And when we get there, we realize that's not what we wanted. Sometimes we think that success is having a new car, a new house, and that means I will be happy. And then we get the new car and the new house, and we're not. That is to say, it's important for us to constantly reevaluate what is our Damascus. Think about what makes you happy. What is it that you truly want? Because it might change. And if it does, it's okay. It is okay to change your plans. It is okay to change your goals as you change. So have you spent time thinking about what is it that you want for your own happiness? Are you clear on what your Damascus is? Not an accusation. Rhetorical. I've noticed my tone there, right? I want to be clear. I'm saying that to myself too. We all struggle to try to find out what makes us happy. But we go through life sometimes looking for what makes us happy, but we're not clear what that is. And as I think it was the Mad Hatter, or maybe it was the rabbit in Alice in the Wonderland, says that if you don't know where you're going, any road will take you there. Right? So what is it that you want? Truly. And how are you going to get there? Right? So there's a lot of different symbolisms here, but I hope that you can see that whether you are in a group of a few alone, or you have been dealt a tough blow and life has thrown you off your horse, or whether you are being asked to make a courageous choice, or you've made your choice and you feel confused along the way, you have to make a decision to move forward and know there's always going to be help along the way. But be clear about where your ultimate goal is. And I really like this story in general because it tells us that if you identify with any different stages, you can see which one is going to come next. So you don't feel like you're out of control. You don't feel like you've been dealt an incredibly unfair blow in your life and you're the only human being that's always going to be there. You're not alone. And especially as we begin to really struggle in a good way, grapple with this idea of who we are in this post-pandemic world and how do I make space for spirituality that I'm beginning to uncover, where I know that I'm an immortal spirit that is not this physical body. How do I deal with that? Do I make time for this? Before I used to say, when I retire, I will make time for spirituality. But what if I don't retire? Or what if tomorrow I'm not here? What's most important? How do I make space for all of this? How do I balance my family, my work? All these questions are within this passage. which was done by somebody who struggled with all of this, who was at the top of his game. He was basically a CEO of a multi-million company, a president of an organization, an incredible famous politician, who along the way decided to leave his job and old world behind to be something completely different, completely more humble. And I'm sure that all his friends thought he was crazy. And you might have witnessed this too when you tell people that you're now going to volunteer your time at the Spiritist group because you want to help those people, or that you're really trying to work on your spirituality, or that you talk to the spirits. Those people are crazy. When we are in search for a purpose and meaning in life, sometimes people will think we are different. That's okay, because they won't make you happy. So there's lots of lessons to be taken away from Paul's journey. But I think that it kind of leads, and I think that, the coolest thing about this whole story, I think, is, in a way, this story is also about Jesus, about spirituality. But we never really see Jesus. He flashes in and out, and then we see the impact he has in Saul's life. And Saul makes that change. And I think that applies to us too. It may be that Christ will not show himself to you as he has shown to Paul. You may be that you won't see a light while you're driving on the I-4, which is a good thing because you probably crashed really bad, right? But some other way in your life, you are going to get a call to pay attention to your spiritual self and find out what is it that you want to do. Consider that Christ's call to you. And you're going to have to determine what is it that you do. And it might happen multiple times. But you already have a leg up. Because if that guy who was Saul, who was literally a killer, could do such a 180 degrees change in his life, certainly we who are starting far ahead can do this much change in our lives if we want to. And I think that's incredibly uplifting and incredibly powerful. And so I hope that you struggle in a good way with that. And you can always go and read his story and make your own connections. You don't have to read the book, but we do some more stuff in here. You can do that by yourself. You can meditate. You can reflect. And you can find a lot of wonderful symbolism that's not here that will come to you. And that I hope it really helps you. Because when we do that, when we begin to understand the spiritual life in general, I think we understand this passage of John a little bit better. This is from the New Testament, John, the Gospel of John, chapter 11. He says, this is Jesus. By the way, I put this different picture. If you're here on Monday, you know, I like to use a different picture because I want to challenge the concept of Christ that we have. This is probably more closer to the historical Jesus that lived with us. But what he looked like does not matter. But it does matter that we stop to think about what he stands for. And he says, I am the resurrection and the life. That sounds very arrogant, right? Anybody else who said that would be arrogant. However, he was the real deal. So he's actually saying, hey, spoiler alert, I'm the resurrection and the life. Like, I am showing you the way, right? Whoever believes in me, he has to use the me, but he's saying, whoever believes in what I am telling you about spiritual life, even though they die, will live. Because now we know he has resurrected, right? He resurrected, right? He showed us that life goes on after the physical body. We know this. So he's saying, hey, people, life will go on. Now you know this. If you believe in the spirituality, you understand that life goes on after the physical body dies. And whoever lives by believing in me shall never die. And if you understand this, you will step into the full greatness of who you are, an immortal spirit that will never die. Because if you're already living your spiritual life here, your body will pass, but you continue to live. And then he does what he did with Paul, and what he always does as an incredible teacher. He asks us, do you believe this? And he puts it on our court. That's kind of amazing. So that's why I think he's really the hidden gem there in the story. But I say that to say that if you want to read more, of course, you're always welcome to do that. You can find it in different places, yada, 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 right? But whatever it is that you do, reflect. Let that story into your heart if you're willing to. And hopefully you appreciate a take where this is really not about conversion. This is really not about embracing a different team. This is about what is it that we do in our lives, with our lives, amidst a moment of difficulty and change. And my sincere hope is that you may follow in Paul's footsteps and seeing them ahead of you to know that what you are going through has been gone through before by many different people, and that there is a way out, and that you will be successful and happy. Because everything he did later as Paul, the journeys and everything else, he did it out of love. Nobody does that because they were forced. And his impact was so great that he has literally changed the way we lead our lives, because we know of Christ mainly through his letters. We are here today, and there's cathedrals, there's cities named after him. He's an incredible figure. But where he started, so there's hope for us. There's a lot of help and support for us. So I hope that you will continue on your wonderful journey to Damascus, whatever that may be for you, and that along the way, you may find the strength and the persevering to continue to walk no matter what. Thank you for your time and your patience. And I think that we're right on time. I think I talked too much. It might not have made time for questions or interactions. Right? How are we doing on time? We're done, right?
We always give
Yeah.
All
right. Does anybody have a question, a comment, or something that did not sit well with them that they might want to bring up? If you want to, it will be absolutely an honor. Yeah.
We do have some time for Q&A. As when we receive speakers like Daniel, we want to interact further, so feel free to ask anything if you like. He's the source.
He's the source.
Yeah, he is the source.
He's a messenger.
Yeah. Don't kill the messenger.
Absolutely.
It was interesting that Emmanuel also kind of went through a bit of a Damascus moment when you read through the book 2,000 years ago. He actually physically meets Jesus
Yes.
beforehand, and he kind of has that same Damascus type moment to it too.
Mm-hmm. He does. And you read in that book that his is even a tougher one in different sorts, because he's actually one of the people who suggests that Christ be actually hanged or crucified, right? So imagine living with that. And the interesting thing about Emmanuel too, I think it's fascinating. There are two historical proofs of the existence of Jesus. People say Jesus didn't exist. There's actually two different proofs. One is there are mentions by a Hebrew historian called Josephus that mentions Jesus, a prophet, and so forth. And the other one, there is a letter by a certain Publius Lentulus written back to Rome, telling Rome of this encounter with this prophet. So there's actually a letter saying, here's what I saw of Jesus. So you see that his connection to Jesus and the transformation is deep. But I think it also speaks to the universality of this thing, right? It's not that, maybe it is that Paul is a model for us to change ourselves. But I think more than that is about, we all going to go through this journey of change. And what it looks like might be slightly different, but we all go through it. Emmanuel went through it. Paul went through it. You see all these great characters in the New Testament having difficult choices to do as well and make choices. We see Peter denying the Christ 3 times. Also having his moment of being called to the mat, to the carpet. Where you stand? No, I don't know him. I don't know him. I'm not with him, right? And so there's different ways of answering that. But the good news is no matter how we tackle or fumble that, we always have another goal. There's always at the end of the journey. So great point. I think that I find myself oftentimes looking at different great transformations in life stories. And because I like Paul and this framework so much, I kept bringing it back and say, oh, this is kind of like Paul. Oh, this is kind of like Paul here or there, right? But we all go through that, I think. Anyways, I babble. I hope that makes sense.
There was one thing that Paul and Stephen that mentioned well that Jesus doesn't need to be directly there, but he sends his helpers. In that book, he mentions that Stephen and even Abigail were like his mentors, his direct spiritual guides to give him strength because at times he was just going to give up and
Yes.
help them.
Who is this incredible figure that has the ability to inspire us to go beyond what we think we can go to such a degree that his love is able to inspire people who were killed by somebody else to go back and mentor and inspire that person to succeed. Sometimes I think that the incredible love, can you imagine what it must be to be in the presence of Jesus when you're fully open? I can't, but I want to. Right? What a wonderful thing that he coaches us to do these transformational things and never imposes on us. He always asks, what is it that we want? Every time we read the New Testament, you're going to see Jesus asking a question. What do you want of me? Right? He knows. But he's coaching us, he's teaching us so that we can find our own answer because he trusts us that he knows that we need to learn by ourselves. He could have forced us, but he doesn't. So that is an incredible piece, right? That you see Stephen, who was killed by Saul, to be at such a level already where he instinctively understands and asks Abigail to forgive him and not worry about the fact that he was killed by Saul, because he clearly is a person who's really devoted to his faith, right? And basically saying, I bless your marriage, right? Mind blown. So for some of us who had always struggled a little bit with the biblical stuff, because some of us always thought that it was really about old people with weird names walking in dusty sandals in places that, right? This stuff is pretty awesome because it could be closer to us than we imagine. Swap the old name, change the clothes, put it in today's perspectives. Instead of a camel, put a car, put a Tesla in there, whatever you want. But the challenges we go through are universal. So much so that if I could rename the New Testament, I would call it the Book of Change. Because all stories that are in there are about change. And that's a wonderful perspective. And that's what I love about Spiritism. And this is how I will shut up. I will speak for 10 seconds and then 15 seconds and I'll shut up. Spiritism has really changed my mind in the sense that it has brought rationality to all these things and has helped me see things differently. When I understand that there is reincarnation, that right through mediumship and so forth, it sort of takes a little bit of the weight off my shoulders, but also gives me a certain certainty that things are going to be okay. That I will be able to find people along the way, and I know that the people that I care about, even though they pass, they have not really disappeared. They're still there. They can still guide me. It brings me some comfort in knowing these different things. And so I hope that as we continue to grow in understanding of spirituality and that God is ultimately incredibly just and loving, he's a very definition of justice, that we will always have chances and we will always have the ability to learn for ourselves, to grow in understanding. Life and the universe has to make sense. It has to, because God is all wisdom and all knowledge. And so if it doesn't make sense yet, it's because we haven't seen the whole thing yet. We haven't understood, but there will be a time and a place where we do understand the whole thing, but also the small things along the way. So if we find ourselves feeling like we don't have control, we're sad, we're lonely, we're depressed, and that we have forgotten, that's a temporary illusion. Let's back away from that, because we're all going to go through a journey. And so I hope that whatever journey you do in life be one full of love, but more important, growth. And growth sometimes comes in difficult ways. But I know that you can do it because you were placed here in this time and place because you're capable. You will have all the abilities that you need and all the support to do what you need to do. Otherwise, God would not have placed you here. Because if you were placed to do something that you're not able to, that would be mean. And that means that God is evil or mean or rude. And that's not God by definition. So if you are here and you're dealing with a lot of challenges, that's a spiritual compliment. It's God whispering in your ear, you can do this. So take that spiritually. Think of yourself as an immortal spirit. And then I think life gets easier. So that was a lot more than 15 seconds. But I thank you anyways. And I'm thrilled to be here and honored that you shared with me. And I should say, it truly is a pleasure being with you. Thank you for listening to me and for being here. And I'd love to catch up and talk to you afterwards. God bless you. Yeah.